Alabama and Tennessee compared. Although Alabama is certainly not unknown, it is sometimes overlooked in favor of more well-known or larger U.S. states or tourist attractions. Montgomery, the capital of the state, was the first Confederate capital and played a pivotal part throughout the American Civil War. In contrast, Tennessee is where you'll find Graceland, the Smoky Highlands, and Jack Daniels, and it's also where you'll find two of the most influential music cities in the United States, Nashville and Memphis. Want to know how Tennessee, the volunteer state, fares against Alabama, the Heart of Dixie, in the aspects of geography, history, and cultures? Here's all you need to know about Alabama and Tennessee compared. Geography. Alabama. Nearly half of the state is comprised of the southern Appalachians. The higher tributaries of the Cumberland, Kentucky, and Tennessee waterways cut the Cumberland Plains area in half, creating a north-south ridge that extends from Tennessee all the way up to the Canadian border. The more mountainous eastern areas reach elevations of about 1,800 feet. On the eastern side, the Great Appalachian Valley serves as a clear delineator. Georgia is separated from the rest of the Piedmont Plateau by a tiny triangular outcropping that rises an average of 1,000 feet above sea level. When the forested mountains of the state's extreme western edge give way to the more gentle terrain of the coastal plain, a dramatic shift in the state's personality takes place. Several smaller landforms break up the plain into less uniform sections, the fall-line hills towards the north and pine and hardwood strips to the southeast. The Black Belt is a sweeping region that extends deep into the center of Alabama's plains and is easily recognizable due to its historical ties to cotton farming. Bayous and marshes may be found here and there along the 53 miles, 85 kilometers of shoreline, which is backed by forests growing on fine sand and faced by long expanses of white sand beachfront. Tennessee. By geological standards, Tennessee may be broken down into 6 distinct ecosystems. The Unaka Mountains, located in the far eastern region of the state, feature more than 12 summits that are higher than 6,000 feet. The Great Appalachian Basin in East Tennessee features a number of low hills which stand above the surrounding lowlands to the west of both the Unakas and may be anywhere from 30 to 60 miles wide. The Cumberland Plateau is an area west of the Appalachians that is mostly flat but gently undulating with deep and often broad river basins cutting through the landscape. Nashville, also known as the Central Basin, as well as the Highland Rim, comprise the inner low plateau within central Tennessee. The Valley Plain is a gently undulating landscape dotted by tiny hills termed as knobs, and it spans nearly the width of the state from north to south. The low-lying and gently undulating eastern Gulf coastal plain extends westward until it meets the Mississippi Delta Plains, a short strip of marsh and riverbank all along Mississippi River. Populations and areas. Tennessee is around 106,752 square kilometers in size, whereas Alabama is roughly 131,426 square kilometers in size, a difference of almost 23%. Meanwhile, there are now 6.3 million Tennesseans. In other words, this indicates that the population of Alabama has decreased by 1.6 million compared to Tennessee at around 5 million people. Economy. Alabama. While the national average household income has increased gradually over the last several decades, Alabama continues to lag well behind the other 49 states in terms of per capita income. However, metropolitan regions have a better economic basis and more optimistic tendencies, which are obscured by the state's rural poverty. Most of this improvement has resulted from manufacturing's consistent support to regional prosperity, but the continuous expansion of the service industry is also crucial. Agriculture. Later, as a result of efforts to diversify agricultural output, a lot more land was set aside for forests, and cotton areas were converted to grassland for beef and dairy livestock. The state's agricultural economy now relies heavily on poultry. Cotton, nuts or ground nuts, soya, and maize are the main crops. Since the middle of the 20th century, farm revenue has increased dramatically, as has the typical farm's value. The percentage of the state's economy devoted to agriculture agriculture, as well as the number of people employed in farming and associated industries, have both fallen gradually during the same time period. Manufacturing. In the middle of the 20th century, the state's manufacturing sector got a boost thanks to the wartime military industry. Even while iron and steel manufacturing are still significant to the state's economy, other industries, including agriculture, textiles, clothing, paper, pharmaceuticals, and polymers, have helped lessen the state's dependence on primary metals. Services. As the headquarters of major state institutions, regional companies, federal insurance firms, and worldwide construction enterprises, Birmingham has become a significant financial and commercial hub. The city's transition toward a service economy mirrors the national pattern in Alabama, in which the service industry accounts for around 75% of non-farming employment. Tennessee. After the middle of the 20th century, the service industry became the primary driver of economic growth in Tennessee. Despite continued federal initiatives in conjunction with both the TVA as well as the U.S. Department of Energy, the growth of data and high-tech companies in Tennessee has lagged behind that of other nearby states. Resources and power. The mining sector in Tennessee primarily produces pulverized rock, followed by building supplies, dimension stone, as well as other materials. The state's prominence in the metals industry is not limited to zinc. The Cumberland Mountains are home to vast reserves of coal, the state's major fuel commodity. Manufacturing. Digital and computing hardware, logistics machinery, food and pharmaceutical items, and metal goods are among the state's most important industrial outputs. Since the latter part of the 20th century, the production of automobiles has been among the most rapidly expanding industries in Tennessee. Services. In the first years of the new millennium, the service industry in Tennessee was responsible for more than half of the state's gross domestic product and created the great majority of new employment. The state's many parks, historical monuments, and entertainment venues have contributed to the rapid growth of the tourist industry, which is now a considerable contributor to the state's economy. The industry as a whole has been expanding, with significant expansion in healthcare services. People. Alabama. Many residents of this state trace their lineage back to the wave of European settlers that hit the state in the 19th century, particularly from the states to the east and north. About a quarter of Alabamians are of African heritage, many of whom have family roots in the state that date back to slavery. Very few people in Alabama are of a different race or were born in a different country. The majority of the state's residents identify as Christians, and the Protestant denominations most prominent in the state are the Baptists and Methodists. There was a dramatic demographic change from country to urban and suburban areas of the state towards the end of the 20th century. For decades, the Black Belt's traditional cotton-growing areas have seen a steadily decreasing population as people leave the countryside for city life. When it comes to population and economic activity, Birmingham still dominates the state. Since its explosive expansion in the 1970s, Mobile, Alabama's port city and second biggest metro area, has been growing at a more gradual rate. Tennessee. White individuals of European heritage make up the vast majority of Tennesseans. People of African descent make up a sizable minority in the United States. A tiny percentage of the inhabitants is comprised of residents of Asian, Hispanic, as well as Native American descent. The Hispanic community has expanded significantly during the late 20th century. The Chickasaw towards the west, as well as the Cherokee towards the east, were previously established in the area, now known as Tennessee, when massive groups of white Europeans started to settle there during the 18th century. Scotch-Irish and English immigrants dominated the early European population, while Germans were already highly established. Slaves of African lineage were imported to the New World by Europeans, and their numbers expanded dramatically in the late 19th century when cotton was cultivated more widely in mid and west Tennessee. Numerous African Americans fled Tennessee towards the 20th century, while large groups of white Americans settled there. About 80% of Tennessee's inhabitants remain white during the current 21st century, with the remaining 20% being African American. Culture. Alabama's countryside communities have a rich ethnic history. Especially captivating to folklorists is the skill of great storytelling, and quilting is also considered a well-evolved craft. Alabama's historical heritage includes a strong tradition of religious music in the forms of gospel groups and shape note or fasola singing. Key components of ragtime, blues, and rural music may be traced back to the composer's exposure to rural life. Mound State Monument in Hale County is one of the most significant sites of the ancient Mississippian civilization, while Fort Morgan, a Confederate bastion guarding the approach to Mobile Bay, is under the state's watchful eye. Alabama is home to several instances of 19th century domestic architecture that have survived to the present day. Tennessee. Many well-known artists have arisen from Tennessee's regionally based culture, which reflects the state's economic, cultural, and geographical diversity. East Tennessee's songs, handicrafts, and tales owe a debt to white European pioneering culture, while West Tennessee's music, craftwork, and tales owe a debt to the cultural influence of African Americans. The people of Middle Tennessee have fostered a diverse array of cultural institutions. When it comes to American music, Tennessee has always been on the cutting edge. Various regional Appalachian ambient soundscapes with Scotch-Irish roots coexist in the East, with more mainstream country music forms. Conclusion. Despite sharing a nearly same geographic location, Alabama and Tennessee compared here couldn't be more different from one another in terms of culture, education, and economics. Both Tennessee and Alabama have deep roots in American history and continue to make significant contributions to the nation today. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe, comment, and turn on the notification bell.